In this session, let's start looking at the operations phase of the project, wherein one of the most important aspect in the operations is how do I handle the various revenues and expenses. So for that, I need to have various assumptions on what all are the various sources of revenue, right? Either in some cases it could be a part of the contract document itself, or in some cases I may have to think of the various revenue generating mechanisms out of this project, because as a part of as a part of the concession agreement also, all these various sources of revenues can very well be highlighted, and at the same time you have your own set of assumptions for the ongoing maintenance expenses, because whenever you are giving it as an operations contract to your operations contract agency, you would be understanding what are your expenses that you are incurring on a regular basis. Along with them, though in this session we'll deal with these two aspects, but we would also have a separate workouts, one for depreciations, because that's one important aspect that goes into our profit and loss statements and all these things. So we'll have a mechanism to handle the depreciation, we'll have a mechanism to handle the tax, how much tax you have to pay, and we'll also have we already looked at the mechanism with respect to the leasing, the lease rentals for the entire period, and we will also deal with the interest costs, right? We have only looked at the interest during the construction period till now, the interest and probably the principal repayment part. So this kind of a separate workout we will do, and after doing all these things we will carry this entire knowledge into a full-fledged profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, a cash flow statement, from where we would also get into determining the value of the project or the returns of the project. So to start with, we will look at the revenues and the expenses, which are primarily the real business part, the operating revenue. Otherwise, I would also call it as operating revenue as well as operating expenses. So these are the two things we will look at, and of course, the various sources of revenue can in themselves be very complicated, right? Probably if I am thinking of let's look at some of the sources of revenue that the case was highlighting. If I look at here, yeah, parking revenues 2.5 crores at the current utilization levels. But of course, what we are saying is, if the utilization level is something more or something less, we should either increase or decrease the revenue. But whatever it is, the parking revenue we are saying at around 2.5 crores, but that itself, arriving at that number itself could have been a big exercise, in the sense the analysis could have gone like, okay, what is the area that is earmarked for parking, and in that parking area how many cars can be parked, what could be the occupancy on a daily basis, how much charge should I do for the car parking fee, and how many such cars, or what is the turnaround of such cars on a daily basis. All these input could have gone in to arrive at that 2.5 crores itself. So assuming all that background work has been done, I'm starting at this layer. saying these are the various sources of revenue as of the current prices. As of the current prices, I am saying these are the sources of revenue under the assumption of 100% utilization. So, in this business model, we are expecting that the revenues will come from parking, bus terminal, budget hotel, health center, right, bank extension counters. From all these things, we are expecting that the revenues will get generated, and under the assumption of 100% utilization. So I should be able to forecast these revenues for the entire operations period. I should not look out for the construction period here, because I will not get any revenues during the construction period. But this 2.5 is for the current year as per the current prices, but we are making an assumption that my revenues will be growing at the rate of 7% every year. So I can very well bring in even that kind of increment into my revenues for each of the years. So what I'll do is I'll create another sheet targeting revenues and expenses. Probably otherwise you can very well handle these two things separately also in two different sheets, especially if there is a lot of complication going in. But the one thing I suggest you to go ahead with is, or practice is, all the calculations should come from your assumption sheet itself. Even if you are taking some additional time in terms of your modeling exercise, everything has to come from the assumption sheet. Anything whichever you are changing, that has to come from the assumption sheet itself. Okay, again, the first two lines I'll keep them as it is from any of these sheets. If this value is equal to blank, I will leave this as blank, otherwise fill it with this value. So the same logic, I'll extend it to the second line, and probably I would also take it up to AZ, right? I will take it up to AZ, the same logic, fair enough. Now, so which means up to here, this is the construction and this is the operation space. Now, let's look at the revenue side before we get into the expenses part. The revenues, we are saying these are the various sources of revenues. So probably because this is exactly a simple list, I will simply copy it. Probably you don't need to, there is nothing with respect to calculations for them, so that's the reason I am taking the revenues list as it is. But wherever the calculations are involved, I would try to go ahead with linking it with the assumption sheet itself without doing any kind of manual copy paste kind of exercise. So in as far as the parking revenues are concerned, what is that I am saying? I'll pull out, these are the revenues from parking, but this is in the current year, and so year on year they are going to grow up by 7%. So how do I build that logic? If this number is equal to 1, means the first year, take that revenue as the exact value itself. Now let's see. If the B1, I think I should put $1. I have to freeze it. Right? It can become C1, D1, whatever, but the 1 has to be frozen. If B1 equal to 1, take it as this. Otherwise, multiply the previous